where we are with Gaza, I have to say, I have never seen more navel-gazing, virtue-signalling, pontificating nonsense from our politicians and indeed our royals.
Yeah.
Why don't they just get in a circle in Westminster and sing Kumbaya? Because that is the equivalent of what they're doing today. We have today got lots of discussion about what Prince William has had to say in a joint statement from the palace on behalf of him and his wife, Princess of Wales, but also what he's had to say. But also we've got these votes in the House of Commons later. Now, question I'm asking today is about Prince William. Because we'll have the results of votes, well, later this afternoon, early evening, and we can talk about that tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well if you want to get in touch. But I want to ask you about Prince William because he's facing criticism for calling for an end to the fighting in Gaza. Is that too political? Is he straying onto territory that perhaps is just really where politicians should be? Is that international diplomacy and not the job of a above the political fray, political generally topics for a royal? I want to know your reaction. Should he be criticised? Was what he said wrong, or was what he said right? Do you get in touch? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text on 87222, or get in touch on X at TalkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Now, so before we go to what is going to be happening in the Commons later, after PMQs, what Prince William has had to say, seems, on the face of it, fairly apolitical. I mean, who doesn't want peace? He said, he said too many have been killed in the conflict. I think we'd all agree with that, wouldn't we? He urged more humanitarian aid and the release of the hostages by Hamas, and he called for an end to the fighting as soon as possible. He echoed Winston Churchill. We quoted this on the show yesterday. Even in the darkest hour, we must not succumb to the counsel of despair. I continue to cling to the hope that a brighter future could be found, and I refuse to give up on that. We understand his statement was checked with Number 10. They backed the statement. There's been criticism, thinly veiled, by the Israeli government. We've had some former politicians saying, we're under some dangerous territory, some royal commentators. What do you think, Benedict?
I mean, on the face of it, as you say, seems fairly apolitical, to which the response is, well, what was the point of something that doesn't actually say anything? Just hand-wringing, going, oh, I say, chaps, this is awfully beastly, you really ought to stop. Doesn't help anybody. It doesn't massively sort of change people's perspective of him. If it sort of alleviates something on his conscience, well, good for him. But I think it's sort of cited beneath the office of the Prince of Wales, which is, not the head of state, but sort of in line to be just saying, oh, this is how I deeply feel, so I am going to wait.
He's expressed profound concern.
But the problem is, whatever way you look at it, him saying, whatever he says actually about the hostages, which we all know is not actually going to happen, and actually he's had a very long time to wade in about the hostages.
Oh, no, they did give a statement on, I think, October the 10th.
October the 10th. How long ago was that? There have been many weeks since then that these people have not been released. To come in now, just as the Israelis are saying, well, here we believe is the last, stronghold of Hamas, a terrorist organisation, for him to come out now, just before the Israelis do that, and say, too many people have died, is, whatever way you look at it, that's a criticism of Israel. That is saying now, at this point, too many people have died, is a criticism of Israel. It is saying that they should stop. And, I mean, for a start, it shows the futility of his office, actually, because they don't care, they're not going to listen, it doesn't actually achieve anything. But you do then have to say, actually, you've had a very long time in which to say, so where actually it was the line? Was it a specific number?
This is a fascinating thing.
What happens the next time there's a conflict somewhere else? Right now, the Armenian government is saying the Azeris are about to cross the border and hundreds of thousands might die. Will he do the same? He hasn't up to now.
This is an extraordinary thing for me. It's the focus on what is happening in Gaza and loads of people who profess desperate concern, as I think we should all be, about innocent civilians in Gaza, particularly children, who are losing their lives because of this conflict. And it doesn't matter who started it. That's all irrelevant. There are children and men and women. Well, I don't know why people always say women. They worry about children and women. I worry about men as well, by the way.
Because men's lives don't matter in the PR battle.
But men, women and children who have nothing to do with this conflict are dying, OK? And the same on the Israeli side as well. Now, the concern that people express for Gaza is maybe well-placed, but a lot of these people never spoken up about people in Syria being bombed by Assad, never spoken up about what's been going on in Yemen, never spoken up about what's happened. And again, we talk about this sort of this international sort of brotherhood of Muslims, where you stand up for people of the same faith. Well, but where are they? Where are they? They're not outside the Chinese embassy every day protesting for the Uyghurs who are being imprisoned in what are essentially concentration camps and being sterilised by their millions. I mean, this is the thing. They don't. They seem to be only concerned when it is a battle with Israel. And that tells us something, I think. But here's the thing, OK?
Yes.
Prince William has made a political statement. There was lots of concern about King Charles when he was Prince of Wales, that he was getting too political. As you say, this doesn't change anything. It's clearly angered the Israelis who are our allies. I think people have a right to say something and get involved. The trouble is, this is either a kumbaya statement, or, you know, all we are saying is give peace a chance. Well, yes, but why don't you go to Qatar, talk to your big rich mates who run Qatar and say, why don't you stop harbouring and funding terrorists who kill and rape and take hostage innocent Israeli civilians? Because that would be, do some behind-the-scenes stuff rather than issue a kumbaya statement.
I mean, people didn't do it when Qatar harboured the Taliban either, because Qatar can play both sides. It's very good at playing both sides. But, you know, just to touch upon your point about the Uyghurs, it's not just... I can almost understand the refusal to criticise what the Chinese do to the Uyghurs, because China is too big, too powerful in the region, and it intimidates a lot of governments there. But actually, it's about what Muslim governments do to their own people and their own minorities, the Balokis in Iran and in Pakistan, what the Turks do to the Kurds.
The people responsible for the state of what's going on with the Palestinians in Gaza right now are Hamas, ruled by billionaires living in palaces in Qatar.
Yeah, the Rohingya, the Copts, you can name so many different minorities that are being actively persecuted by other Muslims, and nobody cares within the region. Because the key issue, and this is not to say that this is how Prince William feels, I think he feels pressured by the pressure that's being applied on politicians in this country by external factors. But the reason why people get so het up about this is it's not even simply anti-Semitism. It is the idea of the Jew as the self-assured, the strong, the powerful, not the person to be trodden on. That's the key thing. And I think that that is what really...
How dare Jews not be victims?
It angers them. It's why you see so much anger from the political left as well, because when Jews were, you know, an oppressed minority, there was some sort of semblance of, you know, coexistence, of comradeship. But the idea that they might look after themselves and not be the oppressed minority, but the settler colonialists, that is beyond the pale. So you then have the sort of the twin, the unholy alliance between the Islamists and the far left. And that is putting pressure on politicians. And clearly the Prince of Wales is feeling that.
Yeah, and again, for me, I think this is virtue signalling. I really do. And again, that's not the job of royals. The job of royals is to stay above the political fray. This is political. Look, it's going to get very political today. We have Prime Minister's questions at midday. We're going to be talking to Peter Caldwell about the highlights of that. No doubt that we talk about what happened to by-elections, the recession. The latest figures showing we've been in recession the end of last week, and all that's going on. But a lot of the focus today is going to be on what happens afterwards. So sometime between about 4 o'clock and 7 p.m. this evening, we're going to have a number of votes in the House of Commons. And they're going to be based on basically an opposition day motion, which is being tabled by the SNP. Now, just to keep everyone up to date, and do pay attention at the back, I will be testing you later. The SNP has a motion calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, condemning what they call the collective punishment of Palestinians. It does sort of pay lip service to, you know, the Hamas taking hostages, returning the hostages, and October the 7th. But the focus is on an immediate ceasefire. Labour have tabled an amendment after much chit-chat and sitting on the fence at meetings yesterday. A Labour amendment says that Israel's planned assault on Rafah in the next few weeks, is the southern part of Gaza, where 1 million refugees from Gaza City and elsewhere are taking refuge, must not take place. So the intervention must not take place, and demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire that must be observed, they say, by all sides. Well, there are only two sides. There's Israel and there's Hamas, right? Yeah. The Tories, apparently, the government has tabled a motion calling for an immediate humanitarian pause, backing Israel's right to self-defence. Now, the decision will be made in the next 20 minutes or so by Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, over which of those amendments, the SNP vote's going to be voted on, which of those amendments will be voted on, in what order. It may well be that because of the Tory amendment, the Labour amendment won't be part... This is Commons niceties and procedure. In that case, will Starmer, despite pleas with his backbenchers and frontbenchers yesterday, will he face a situation where he has a load of his backbench MPs voting with the SNP against the Labour whip? I think the Labour whip will be to abstain on this vote. And even though these are Commons procedural niceties, tomorrow the headlines will be Labour don't support a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, that's going to be a very big issue for him. Last November, another SNP motion on the conflict saw 56 Labour MPs rebel against Keir Starmer. 10 resignations from the bump bench. I mean, none of them were they weren't household names in their own households. But this is undermining. Now, there's a lot of talk the SNP have basically tabled this motion not because it's all about what happens in Gaza. The idea that Hamas and the Israelis could give two hoots what the SNP or any MP in the Commons thinks about this is for the birds. But they want to try and make things difficult for Keir Starmer. Here's the question. What's the difference between an immediate ceasefire, an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and an immediate humanitarian pause?
An immediate humanitarian ceasefire, I imagine, would have some sort of caveat to allow aid in. It would allow the possibility to evacuate more civilians, which is part of the issue that they're having. Of course, lots of Palestinians move south to the Rafah because the Israelis told them go there. Because
they told them to go there, exactly.
Whereas the SNP amendment is just everybody should stop fighting and things should go back to the way they were, which of course is unacceptable for Israel because that's how Hamas was able to build up strength and attack them in the first place. It's grotesque to be playing politics about this. But
it is playing politics
by the SNP because they recognise right now Labour is ascendant. What is the major threat to the SNP? It is never the Tories, it's not the Tories, it is Labour in the ascendancy. So what do? You find the divisions, you stoke the divisions, you drive a wedge. And the SNP has calculated, quite rightly, that there are a lot of Labour MPs who are stupid enough or principled enough, doesn't really matter which, who are going to fall for this. They are going to fall for this. They are going to vote, if the SNP amendment motion is the one that's put forward, they will vote for it. They will defy their leader. And some of those MPs will do it because they know that it'll play very well in their own constituencies. But it will make Keir Starmer, A, look weak, he's not in control of his party, and B, it will lose Sir Keir Starmer, the leader, support from those constituencies because they want a full-throated condemnation of Israel. So it is not the nicest thing to be doing, but from the SNP's perspective,
it's clever politics.
Smart.
My worry about all of this is that we've imported sectarian politics from around the world.
Yeah.
Where people are voting. I don't want people voting along Catholic or Protestant lines in Northern Ireland. I don't want people voting along. I'm an atheist. I don't want my vote to be decided by being an atheist. I don't want Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever you Jew, whatever you are. I think that's unhealthy. I think we should all be sharing in the same concerns about, the cost of living, housing, education, NHS waiting lists. That should be what's debated. For instance, in the Rochdale by-election next week, Gaza seems to be a crucial issue for a lot of people standing and for people voting. It shouldn't be. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be. It should be about an MP who can do the best job for those constituents in living in Rochdale, who, by goodness me, need a lot of help right now in a very impoverished town. But this is the thing. I just think this is playing politics with people's lives.
It is. On the subject of importing sectarianism, you're completely right. And it shows one of the great ironies of multiculturalism, which is that the people who have pushed multiculturalism do not know the first thing about a lot of the cultures they're importing and do not wish to ask.
And also claim that all cultures are... This idea... Well, I always have this Western imperialism, this superiority. I know I yabber on about this a lot, but it's something we really need to remember.
Cultures that stone women to death who are raped
but all cultures are equally valid. No, they're not.
Yeah.
The reason why these people want to come and live in this country is because of our superior culture of freedom. Well, we used to have full freedom of speech, but freedom and equality, the right not to have to marry someone your father makes you marry and not be stoned to death as a result. The right to have a divorce. The right for gay couples to walk in the street and not face abuse, or I don't know, being prosecuted. I mean, these things are really basic to me as like things that I really value about my country and about the values of the West. And yet, so many people on the left who used to push these values are very, very happy to basically say, no, that's absolutely fine. Your culture is absolutely... You put women in shrouds, that's absolutely fine.
Because that's
gay people are completely ousted from... I mean, I just find it completely bizarre that they think these cultures are equal. They're not.
Well, because the people that are pushing this are very ignorant and very stupid. And the end result of this will be an erosion of liberalism in this country. Because sooner or later, we all want free speech. You and I tend to be quite absolutist on this. But actually, if you're bringing in millions of people, and it is millions of people now, who are coming with fundamentally anti-Semitic views, at some point, to project the best integrated minority in this country, the Jewish community, there will have to be incredibly tough laws around anti-Semitism, by which we say you will be deported, you will be imprisoned. It's a red line that you can't cross. And we'll have to say to everybody else who's not anti-Semitic, well, I'm sorry, but this is what we've managed to achieve. So now we're going to have to push back on this. And yes, it will mean impinging on freedom of speech, but that is the alternative is allowing actual anti-Semitism.
Which we're doing every single day and every Saturday. There's going to be big pro-Palestinian protests outside Parliament again today. And again, there'll be many people there who have genuine concerns for innocent civilians dying. But there are also some... those marches every Saturday are... I think 4 of the 6 major organisers have close links with Hamas. What does that tell you?